Hi, welcome to the May wrap-up. These are all the books that I read, or at least mostly read in May. May was a pretty good month for the most part. I did have a little like mini vacation in the middle. It was just for 2 days, but still it took a lot out of me. So I'm actually still sick, so if I sound weird, that is why. But yeah, in May I went to Buffalo for a night to see Hozier in concert, and it was wonderful. I'm not sure if I've posted the vlog before this video or after it. Either way, I will link it, so if you guys want to go see all the cool Hozier footage, it'll be in a vlog either before or after this video. But yeah, when I got home, I got sick. I always get sick after concerts. It's just, my body hates me. It's fine. So I'm still sick, still dealing with that. I've done like very little reading over the last week, so the majority of my reading was in the first like 3 weeks of May. But it is what it is. I've spent most of the last week just like rotting in bed trying to get better, so it's fine. But yeah, still had a pretty good reading month. In terms of books that I'm actually counting towards my May stats, I missed a book, my bad. I actually read 9 books, which was 2,987 pages, and that also included 32 hours of audiobook listening. So we'll just start from the first book and make our way down to the most recent. So the first book that I read in May was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This one is a paranormal romance between a vampire and a werewolf. It was so much fun. Basically, the main character, the vampire, she was sent away to go live with the humans for her entire childhood as collateral, as like a symbol of peace. I kind of forget the details, I'm not gonna lie. And now as an adult, she's also being sent off to go marry a werewolf as another symbol of peace and collateral to stop a war from happening. But she agrees to it because she has ulterior motives. Her best friend is missing. There was a note with the name of the werewolf, like the guy that she's gonna marry. His name was written down on a note in her best friend's journal before she disappeared. So she agrees to marry him to try and figure out where her best friend is, and things go from there. It was super fun. I really enjoyed it. It was my first Ali Hazelwood book. I don't really have any interest in reading her other books. I'm not that big on contemporary romance, but paranormal romance, hell yeah, I love that, and this one was fantastic. I kept hearing online that it was like so crazy, and like there was like all this like weird like monster-y paranormal stuff happening, and the smut was like wild, and I'm like, is it though? Because like the thing that I was kind of like concerned about was that like it's Ali Hazelwood, right? And I think up until this book she's only ever written contemporary romance, so all of her fans are mostly like contemporary romance readers. So my thinking was that like Bride might be crazy to them because they're not used to that genre. As somebody who mostly reads paranormal romance and like monster romance and that kind of thing, would it be weird to me? Probably not, and I was correct. It was not. This is just like a pretty normal paranormal romance, like nothing too funky happening. You kind of get all the things that you might expect with a vampire and a werewolf in terms of the weird stuff, which like, again, if you're not used to that, sure, it's maybe a little jarring, but that's just kind of like a normal thing in the kind of books that I read. So like it didn't really surprise me. It didn't like shock and awe me, but it was really fun. I did like seriously enjoy it. I thought the main character was hilarious. She was that like dry, sarcastic, like kind of sassy character that when it's done well, it's done very, very well, but it can be done very annoying most of the time. But Ali Hazelwood did a fantastic job with that character type. I love the relationship between the werewolf husband and his little sister. It was adorable. I did wish that we got more of the main character and her family, the vampire family, because they played a huge part in the plot, but I didn't really have any like feelings towards them, so that part kind of fell flat for me. But overall this was still like a fantastic book, and I definitely recommend it, and I gave it 4 stars. And then I did a little like weekly vlog where I read a whole bunch of sequels. By a whole bunch I mean 3, not that many, but still it was pretty good. So the first one that I got was to read Our Dark Duet by Schwab. This is the sequel to The Savage Song, I think it was called. Pretty sure. It's the Monsters of Faeri series, and I loved this. It was so good. I did like book 1 just like the tiniest little bit better. I used the Kowal rating system, and I think there was like one category where it was 1 point less than book one. Everything else was the exact same, so pretty much the same level of love as the first one. I did like the characters better in the first book. I found like the character arc to be more interesting. I liked the relationships better in book one, but the plot was more interesting in book two, so kind of trade off there. But either way, this was fantastic. This duology is, how do I explain this one? It takes place in a city that has like Gotham City vibes to it. It's very dark, very like there's like literal monsters crawling all over the streets, and the city is divided in half. On the one end is the one main character who's a type of monster who can like reap souls if you're a sinner. He can just kill you if you're a sinner and just like eat your soul, and that's how he gets food. So he's working for essentially like the military side who's trying to take down the other end of the city, which that one is ruled by this like overlord dude who can control the monsters. And the other main character is the daughter of that guy. So these two end up meeting and they become friends and kind of go from there a little bit. It was a really interesting series. Again, the first book I did like just a little tiny bit better, but book two just picks up where we left off from book one. I think it's like 10 months later or something like that. It was so well done, which of course it would be. It's V. Schwab, so like of course I'm gonna love it. Like she's probably my favorite author, and I've loved everything that I've read from her so far. And this one I also gave 4 stars. Next up is The Brides of High Hill by Novoa. This is the 5th book in the Singing Hills cycle. This series, I was saying in the vlog where I read it, where like I honestly don't know what's happening in these books, like literally ever. Even while I'm reading them, I'm not retaining what's actually going on. But I love these books because the experience of listening to them, just like putting in my headphones and sitting back and listening to this beautifully told story for like an hour or two, is so incredible that I love these books regardless of the fact that I have not one single clue what's happening in them. Novoa's writing style and the cadence of the narration is just so calming and very soothing. And like, even though these are definitely not like chill, cozy books, they definitely have some like not gory things going on, horror adjacent sometimes. Like this book had to do with monsters and there was some pretty gory stuff in there, and like the smell of rotting corpses was a pretty prevalent thing in this one. So they're by no means cozy books, but they feel very cozy to me in the sense that like they're just a beautiful reading experience. These books feel like they're meant to be oral stories, and just listening to them is just so lovely, and I love these books. The next book in this series being released is always one of my favorite times of year. And yeah, this was a fantastic addition to this series. I gave this one 4 stars as well. It's like closer to a 4.5. The premise of the whole series is there's a cleric named Nghi just wandering around collecting stories to bring back to wherever they live. I forget what it's called, but the place where all of the other clerics go, and they just record all their stories and write everything down. So yeah, like they're literally just like chilling through the countryside, just collecting stories and meeting people and like just having a good time. So not always a good time. Sometimes the times are very bad. I love this series. I think they are just such beautiful little tidbits of fantasy. They're gorgeously written and just a really, really nice time to listen to over audio. And as always, I can't wait for the next book in the series. After that, I picked up The Fated Sky by Robinette Kowal, I think. Marie, one of the two. This is the 2nd book in the Lady Astronauts series. So this series is a alternate history historical fiction where in the first book a meteorite struck Earth in the 1950s. And the main character, she's a scientist, and she was also a pilot in World War II. She and her husband, who's also a scientist, they are part of the team. I think they're meant to be like this alternate histories version of NASA. They're both working with them to try and colonize the moon because the main character, she did all the math on the impact of the meteorite and figured out that it's going to cause global warming and it's eventually going to cause a mass extinction on Earth. So now they're trying to colonize the moon in order to get humanity off of Earth before it's too late. So that's the main plot, and then the main character is also trying to fight for the rights of women to be astronauts as well. So she's known as the Lady Astronaut, and it's a lot about gender equality and class and race and a lot of like really interesting topics kind of woven into this really cool like historical sci-fi. I figured that I would like this series, but I didn't think that I would like it as much as I do. The first book had me like crying multiple times. The second book, not quite as much, but still had me tearing up quite a bit. These are just fantastic books. They're so much fun. They're so interesting. They have a lot to say. The main character is very flawed, and she acknowledges her flaws and tries to learn from them, and she keeps fucking up and keeps trying to do better. So yeah, I really enjoy these books so far. I think there's only 3 books total. So next month when I have my next Audible credit, I'm going to listen to that one, and I can't wait for it. This one was also a 4-star. Next up was Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner. This one is a contemporary romance following our 2 main characters. The first one is a college-age girl. She goes to a bar one night and she sees this beautiful woman from across the bar, and they end up hooking up in the bathroom and also the backseat of their car. And then the next morning, the college-age character, her friend that she met in college, invites her to go out to breakfast with her and her mom, and discovers that her friend's mom is the one that she hooked up with the previous night. And things get super awkward from there. I loved this book. I'm kind of surprised by that because I don't really read a whole lot of contemporary romance anymore, but this one really took me by surprise. I ended up flying through it. I took this one to the beach with me one day just to kind of like have an easy read for the beach, and I read like 100 pages at the beach. I just couldn't put it down until I literally had to come home because I was so sunburned that I was in agony. The next night I just sat in bed and read the next like almost 300 pages in one sitting and like literally could not put it down. This was so good. The main character, the younger one, I found her to be super annoying at first, and like she definitely stayed annoying throughout the entire book, but I ended up kind of liking that about her character because it really just pointed out how different these 2 characters were, because like she's 21 years old, she is very impulsive, she's very rash, she is not good at communicating, whereas the older character, she is trying to communicate her feelings, she's trying to like talk about things and figure out what's going on, and the younger one is just like all dramatic and a 21-year-old, so it was a really interesting way to like look at their relationship and see how different they are, but also see how well they still work somehow. So overall, this was just a super fun book that had a really interesting take on like an age gap romance. I recently read You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi. It was kind of a similar concept to this. I was hesitant to pick this one up because I read that one so recently that I was scared that it was gonna kind of compare them, because like nothing could really compare to You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. That book was phenomenal. It was 5 stars. It was one of the best books that I've read so far this year. So like I knew that this book would not be able to compare to that one. So I was worried that I was going to end up not liking this one because I just read that one recently, but that was actually not a problem. These books were different enough that it didn't even really cross my mind while I was reading it. I liked this book a lot. It was really good, and I gave it 4 stars. After that one, I picked up Most Ardently by Gabe Novoa. This one was part of the Remixed Classics series that a whole bunch of authors are doing together, where they take classic books and remix them with marginalized characters. So Most Ardently takes the story of Pride and Prejudice and turns the character of Elizabeth into a trans boy named Oliver, and Mr. Darcy is a gay boy, and they meet and things go from there. It was such a good book. I love Pride and Prejudice. I haven't read the book, but like the movie with Keira Knightley is one of my favorite movies of all time. I picked this book up on a whim because I was planning on watching that movie. I was just in the mood for it, and then I was like, hold on, there's that book by Gabe Novoa that's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, so how about I go read that instead? So I picked it up and I flew through it. I think I read it in like 2 sittings. It was so sweet and so cute. My one critique of it was that some of the bigger scenes, or scenes that should have been bigger, that like the very emotional scenes or like the very impactful scenes, felt very rushed and very short. But other than that, I thought this was such a good book. Like, I loved the characters, I loved the relationships. The Bennet family was hilarious. The romance between Oliver and Mr. Darcy was so cute. And yeah, I just thought that it was a really interesting way to like have their stories intermingle, was by making the main character into a trans boy, and like the reason why Mr. Darcy hates women and is so standoffish at balls is because he's gay. Like, that would make perfect sense as to why he doesn't want to dance with people at balls. It's not just because he's an asshole, he just has no interest in women, but he can't dance with boys. So yeah, I just thought that was a really interesting take on their characters. It worked so well, and I loved this one. I also gave it 4 stars. Hi again. So the book that I missed in here was Mayday Flowers by Faeri Sami. I got an arc of this book. I found the author on TikTok and they were giving away arcs. I believe it's a self-published book, so they were just trying to like build up hype around their book and were offering arcs, so I got one. And I got to read it in May, and I was very happy about it. This one is a very sweet, very cute sapphic fantasy romance about a dryad who's like, I think she's like thousands of years old, who lives in the forest, and she wakes up after a 17-year hibernation. She has a family of witches who live in her woods as well, and they decide to throw a party celebrating May Day and celebrating her waking up from her hibernation. So they start to do so and hire a party planner, but unintentionally hire the wrong person. They meant to hire somebody who is aware of the magical world, but instead they hired the other main character, who's a human named Priscilla, who has no idea about anything to do with magic. The two meet to start planning the party, and things go from there. It was such a sweet romance. The underlying plot also had to do with global warming, so that was like an interesting thing to add on to there. So it wasn't just about the romance, there was more to it than that. I also loved the friendships and like family relationships in here as well. And really cool, the main character, the human one, Priscilla, she deals with a mental health condition called maladaptive daydreaming. I had never seen that in a book before, and it's something that I personally deal with as well too. It's one of those things where like I thought it was a totally normal thing until I was like 23, I think. I just thought that everybody, you know, had like multiple periods throughout the day or the week or whatever where you just like get completely lost in a daydream to the point where you can't get out of it until it decides that it's done. Like I thought that's what people also went through when they daydream, because like, you know, like, people talk about daydreaming all the time. I didn't realize that how I daydream is not normal in compared to other people until just a few years ago. So yeah, I had never seen that in a book before, and it was a really interesting thing to add into there. I thought it was handled very well. It definitely made this book stand out more as well too, just compared to like the droves of cozy fantasy romance that's come out recently. This one definitely stood out for that reason. I ended up giving it a 3.5 star. I did have some issue with the writing once in a while. I found it to be kind of awkward in some places, because the one main character, the Dryad, she's like thousands of years old, so her way of speaking is not modern, right? Like, which makes sense. So like the author was trying to give her like kind of an old-timey feel, but kind of gradually throughout the book everybody started talking like that, and I don't think that was intentional. I found that to be a little bit awkward sometimes. There were some like little grammar things here and there as well too that could have been fixed, but that wasn't a huge deal. And then the romance got a little bit heavy-handed around like the halfway mark. I did find that this was a little bit too much. Like it was just like, okay, like I get it, y'all are in love, calm down a little bit. Like it was a little excessive, to the point where it was kind of taking me out of the story. But overall, I still loved it. I do recommend it. It was a great time for a quick fantasy romance read. And then the last book that I finished was The Deathless Girls by Kiran, Millwood, Hargrave. Maybe? This one is a retelling of Dracula's brides, but in this one the brides are Romani, but they were taken as slaves. This one was like very like gothic. It had lots of like nature stuff to it. It was pretty violent in some cases. There was lots of like torture. I don't think there was any like on-page sexual assault, but a lot of threats of it, like a lot of threats of it. It wasn't gruesome, like this is still a YA book, so it wasn't like super violent, but there are a lot of trigger warnings to it, so look that up first if you are planning on reading this one. I liked this book a lot until I read the reviews for it after I finished it. My initial rating was a 4-star. I thought it was pretty fantastic, and then I went and read some reviews of people who are actually Romani, which apparently the author is not, and them just talking about in the reviews how poorly the research was done on Romani language mostly. So a lot of apparently grammatical errors in the language that she used for it. So I did take it down to a 3.5 star, because like you should maybe do your research before you base an entire book on an actual culture and an actual language. And yeah, reading those reviews definitely took down my enjoyment just a little bit of it, but I did still find the actual reading of it before I read those reviews to be pretty good. I'm also very easy to please though. Like I was reading other reviews where they were talking about how like you don't actually see any vampires or even see the word vampire on page until like over halfway through the book, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right. But so you know, I'm a very easy person to please. I just kind of don't think about the negative stuff a lot while I'm like actually reading it. So for me, I had a great time reading this book. I thought it was very well done at first, but yeah, I knocked it down to a 3.5 star after reading those reviews. Okay, and then I have 2 books that I'm carrying over into June. The first one is Howl's Moving Castle. This one I am counting towards my May stats, but I'll be finishing it in June, and that's because I got past the 50% mark in May, so I'm counting it towards May stats. So yeah, I'm currently reading this one. I'm really enjoying it. If you somehow don't know what this book is about or have not seen the Ghibli movie, this one is about a young girl named Sophie who gets cursed by a witch, and she turns into an old lady, and of course because of the curse she's not able to tell anyone that she's cursed, so she has to figure out how to uncurse herself. So she goes to the wizard who lives in the moving castle nearby, where she makes a pact with the fire demon that he has in his house, where the fire demon will break her curse if she breaks his curse. So they're trying to help each other, and she just decides that she's just gonna like tell the wizard that she's his new cleaning lady, and he's just like, okay. So she just kind of moves in and starts cleaning everything, and it's hilarious and super fun. And yeah, really enjoying that one so far. And then the last book for this month that I'm carrying over is Crown of Feathers by Nicki Preto. This one is a book about Phoenix writers. I'm really enjoying it so far. I brought this one with me to Buffalo. I read on the way down. I didn't know reading on the way back, but it's fine. So currently with this one, I am on page 207, so I didn't quite get to the halfway mark for this one, so I am going to be putting it in for June stats. But yeah, loving this one so far. It's a YA fantasy with phoenixes and cool stuff. I don't know. I'm bad at synopses before I've actually finished the book, but so far this one is fantastic. But yeah, those are the books for May. Let me know what you read last month, or if you've read any of these books. I would love to hear your thoughts. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys later on. Bye!